Okay, hello again, YouTube. I am Dr. Brooke, the undergrad who is not really a doctor and is just calling himself for that because it's fun for the purposes of this assignment. Continuing with our question and answer videos here. Um, Next question. How does emotional touching strengthen or weaken a relationship? In general, any sort of touch that expresses positive emotion will usually strengthen the relationship. Touching expresses emotion on a very primal level, and if you express good feelings for a person through touch, they will most likely feel good as a result. However, hostile or negative actions might also be considered as emotional, and in such case, they tend to have a very adverse effect on the relationship. Again, because touch is such a visceral way of expressing emotion. If you strike your partner, it's likely going to cause them a lot of emotional pain and certainly going to be a little bit of a bump in your relationship there. Um, can a relationship be sustained without sexual touch? Yes, one can, though it does depend on the partners and their needs and desires. Sexual touch is usually fairly important in a romantic relationship, since most romantic relationships are formed with the ultimate goal of sexual interaction. If they weren't, then we really wouldn't have any need for boyfriends or girlfriends, because our normal friends and our best friends would pretty much take care of our need for companionship. And it's kind of a cliche that the boyfriend gets fed up with the girlfriend because she's not willing to take the relationship to a sexual level. But in truth, most people do find that sexual interaction and sexual touch are extremely important in a relationship. Maybe not the single most important thing, but certainly kind of up there. Now, there definitely are couples who don't desire a lot of passionate touch in their relationship for one reason or another, and who still do just fine together. This is a little more common in older couples and even couples that have been married for a long time, where the partner's sexual drives have kind of cooled a little bit. Ultimately, however, whether a relationship works without sexual touch will likely depend on whether the feeling is shared. At its base level, a relationship is an exchange for mutual benefit, and if one partner strongly desires passionate touch and is not receiving it, then the relationship will likely develop problems. Nextly, I got several different questions kind of on the same topic here. Firstly, why does the level of physical touch diminish after marriage? How does the level of touch decrease after marriage? And what does research say about why touch in a relationship peaks and then declines? And these questions were in response to something that I touched upon in my presentation, where according to research, the level of touch that a couple will exhibit or interact with usually kind of peaks especially kind of like an example I was giving was in a marriage. Usually the level of physical touch and intimacy will kind of build and build and build until usually about 2 years after the marriage, at which point it usually kind of dies down a little bit and starts to find a more stable level that can be maintained long term. Um, anyway, kind of just to talk a little more about this, touch, and especially sexual touch, tends to become more frequent and intense throughout the relationship forming stage, and usually, again, kind of leading up to marriage, at which point is usually very strong. Usually, however, the level of touch that a couple partakes in will then start to gradually decline, with a peak somewhere during the early stage of a marriage. Usually, statistically, this takes place at about the 2 year mark. From there, touch and sexual touch tend to become a little bit less frequent, though by no means do people usually start going days without touching each other. And maybe that comes later in life, but usually it's not exactly something that just kind of happens immediately, if the couple ever does reach that stage, of course. As a marriage progresses, a couple's level of touch will usually change slowly, kind of going up and down, depending on what's going on in their lives and just kind of generally how they feel about each other. But generally, the pattern is kind of a downward sloping curve. It tends to decline, with most long-term couples generally finding again a comfortable level of touch to maintain, so that both partners can be happy if the relationship stays healthy. If that doesn't happen, then the relationship will usually kind of start to have problems. The rise of this peak is due to the nature of romantic touch and sexual interaction, which is ultimately the reason why people form romantic relationships. As two partners begin to become a couple, they will begin with bonding and caregiving touch. And then, as trust and comfort levels and levels of intimacy are established, then they will begin to experiment with sexual touch. In a healthy relationship that results in marriage, this sexual touch will build and increase until, again, about 2 years after marriage, as the couple is spurred on by the good feelings they get from the emotional and physical intimacy they experience with sexual touch. Um, and then statistically, this wave of good feelings, kind of again begins to lose its power at about 2 years after marriage. This doesn't mean that the couple stops caring about each other or stops desiring each other, but the partners begin to wind down a bit from the whirlwind of emotion and good feelings that generally accompanies a relationship in its early stages. At this point, the couple begins to build long-term bonds based on more than eroticism that will keep them happy together for a long-term relationship. Partners usually still value sexuality and sexual touch, but it is usually no longer the primary thing on their minds. And there are many reasons why this occurs. The elation that people feel during the early stages of a relationship and marriage are kind of nature's way of making sure we pass on our genes. If we didn't really enjoy being in a committed relationship with another person, we wouldn't really form one, would we? And then what would happen to the human race? Um, However, as time passes, the fire begins to fade a little, and as all good things do, and the requirements of daily life kind of set in. If we were still always thinking only about passion during the middle years of the marriage, we wouldn't be so keen to seek a promotion at work or mow the lawn or finally write that book we've been planning for years. And we also probably wouldn't be thinking much about the kids' soccer practice or their college fund. Nature wants to make sure we get together and enjoy one another, but eventually we do have to come down and realize that life involves more than just a newlywed passion. Ultimately, a married couple is meant to find a stable, comfortable level of intimacy and touch that enables them to maintain a meaningful relationship while attending to the business of living, raising children, and looking towards the future. This doesn't mean that a couple's passion is meant to die, and in many failed marriages, a loss of emotional and sexual intimacy is actually what leads to the marriage falling apart. But as we age and our sexual drives begin to dwindle a little bit, and we have to attend to all the different areas of our lives, touch usually becomes more of a tool to maintain the relationship rather than a full-time job in itself. So hopefully that kind of answers the three questions that I got there. Next question. Has any research been? Oh, actually, this is the same question I was just answering there. I just copied and pasted it twice into my list here, so we'll skip that here. Why does kissing keep a relationship strong compared to other types of touch? This is another question that I kind of got several people asking me similar things about. Firstly, kissing is an important part of assessing a partner's physical potential. It provides the body with information about the other person's genetics, their immune system, and overall health, and also subconsciously affects whether or not a person will want to be with the person they're kissing. Um, and then from bits and pieces I read in my sources and in other articles I found online, kissing also has an emotional impact based upon our preconceptions about it. We think of kissing as being romantic, something that you really only do with a romantic partner, and our preconceived notions about it affect the way kissing then affects us. We associate kissing with romance, so in our minds, when we're kissing somebody, we're going to experience emotions that we associate with romance, kind of in a Pavlovian kind of way. This is one of the reasons kissing is important in a long-term relationship. Since kissing equals romance, by partaking in a kiss, partners experience romance at some level, which feeds their feeling of being a bonded couple. And then finally, kissing tends to be fairly important compared to other touches, because kissing is both an emotional or bonding touch and a sexual touch. Because again, for most of us, kissing is something we do with romantic partners, and we associate with romance and passion. And now, as sexual touches go, kissing doesn't take a whole lot of time or energy to accomplish, which makes it kind of an easy thing to do, especially as we and our relationships age and passion is no longer foremost on our minds. But kissing is still, however, a touch that we do associate with passion, romance, and sex. And so kissing provides a relatively easy way for us to reaffirm with our partner that we are still in a romantic, passionate relationship, even if the fire has cooled a bit. And by being a bonding touch as well, it also reaffirms that we are still bonded to our partner on an emotional level. So kissing provides an easy, powerful way to maintain both the emotional and the sexual connection in a relationship. Um, and then, actually right here, I think I'm going to pause the video and take a break for just a moment. I will say hello to you again in just a moment.